Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello and welcome everyone, and my special guest for today, Dr. Shawn Blue.
Thank
Shawn,
you.
hi Shawn.
Hi.
Shawn is a licensed psychologist, and she has also a diplomate in comprehensive energy psychology, which we'll talk a little bit more about. She does consultation and training on mental health, wellness, and diversity and inclusion. And she has co-authored several chapters on topics in books on psychoanalytic perspective of Martin Luther King Jr., divorce, violence, and sexual abuse of children. In 2017, she authored a book on grief and romantic relationships called The Psychology of Modern Dating, Websites, Apps, and Relationships. And she has a new book coming out soon, which we'll talk about. Dr. Shawn has worked at a variety of academic institutions, teaching, and she can talk some more about her background there, and leading other colleagues. And I personally have had the joy of meeting Dr. Shawn in person and working with her on the board of directors for the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. And we've attended conferences together in person. And I am so excited to have you here today. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. And I'm honored to have to be here today. So thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And so we were talking ahead about, what can we talk about that would be interesting and different that highlights
Yeah.
some of your expertise? And so we kind of put our heads together and came up with this notion that would you like to explain some more about where we're going to go today?
Definitely. So I just been thinking lately about what are some more connections between energy psychology, but then also diversity work, right? And so recently I presented on using energy psychology to treat racial trauma. But I also was just kind of thinking about how do we look at diversity as it's connected to truth seeking and guidance and how we make decisions, how we connect with our inner knowing, our inner reflections. And so I thought that might be a good place for us to kind of explore and talk about and chat.
Yes, I love it. And so for those who don't know about energy psychology, and I know that probably won't be the main focus of our talk, but
Sure.
would you like to say a little bit more about that before we go into the next layers?
Of course. The way I like to describe it is that if you think of the body as an energy system, everything has to be in sync in order for us to be healthy. And if there's any dysfunction, then that means that there's something out of whack. And energy psychology is just the treatment that we offer to be able to clear out or cure whatever is dysfunctional. So for those of us that have DCEP through the ACEP organization, we typically focus on meridians, chakras, and auras. And just through some feedback testing, we'll ask some questions, figure out where the dysfunction is, and then we go in and treat it. And so it's a much more complex kind of conversation than that, but that is it to its core of our goal is to figure out where there is energy imbalances and helping people clear those out.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Yeah, so it's a combination of the conventional cognitive work that so many people are familiar with, but adding in the body system so that it's not
Exactly.
just from the neck up, but it involves the whole self. And
Yes.
we do have some ways of figuring out kind of like where things are buried,
Yes.
and then unblocking them in the same way you would with, let's say, acupuncture needles, but we use pressure with
Exactly.
self-touch to kind of move that flow of energy while we're thinking of things or having emotional responses. So thank you.
Definitely.
That was a great little nutshell summary.
Sure. Definitely. And so, if we're thinking about, things related to truth, and if we're thinking about how we make decisions, and if we connect again this idea of energy psychology around it, how are we making decisions when we're feeling truly healthy versus when we're having an imbalance, right? But this added piece of thinking about diverse people, diverse thoughts, diverse experiences, how does that play a part in what we see as true, how we make meaning around that? And so it just intrigues me, and I like to, spend time reflecting around those things too.
Great, yeah. So for those who don't know, how do you define diversity? Because it's talked about a lot, but I don't know that people really spend the time to kind of like say, well, what are you exactly meaning by that term?
Very good question, and you're right. For me, and I do a lot of diversity work, it is individuals who identify as marginalized populations. And we started using the marginalized populations definition, I don't know, within the last 5 or 10 years. It's a newer term, but basically it just talks about identities that are on the margins of society. So that would include, of course, race and ethnicity, even though we know race is a social construct, but ethnicity, it would mean age, it would mean sexual orientation, it would mean gender minorities, it would be religion. So any individuals that kind of don't make up what we would call mainstream. Populations would be considered a marginalized population or
Okay.
diverse.
So does that, my thought about it is that we become differently diverse depending upon our environment.
Yes.
So if you travel or if you're in a group of people who are similar to you for a certain purpose, differently abled. So would that marginalized term still follow you, regardless of the context that you're in?
It's a good question. Um, so meaning I identify as marginalized because one of those identities, um, but then I go to a different environment, would I still be marginalized? That is a really thought-provoking question. I mean, I think in some ways, yes, if your identity is marginalized, it remains marginalized. But no, I mean, part of marginalization is based off of the kind of larger community that you're in. And if the definition is kind of defined based off of, what kind of mainstream America or populations are made up of, if I go into a population that I am a community of, then I guess by definition, you're right. It maybe takes away the piece of marginalization in that context.
In that context, right? And then maybe another aspect that you wouldn't normally identify with as being marginalized might come up.
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
Okay,
So, if I identify as a Black cisgendered female, I go into a community of Black people. Yes, I'm not marginalized in the Black identity, but I might be marginalized in some other way.
right. Maybe
Yes,
by education or where you grew up or
exactly.
personal experiences. So
Yes,
thank you for that. And sorry to
yeah.
stump you, but it was just,
No, it was a great question. I was like, wait a minute. Yes, and.
yeah, because when people travel, then suddenly they're confronted with a different dynamic, a cultural experience, or
Sure,
a different understanding of who they are and what they're about. I'm thinking about, let's say, for example, 150 years ago with women who were in higher education
sure.
versus today, so
Right.
yeah. And anyway,
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we get from that beautiful definition of diversity
Mm-hmm.
and marginalization
Yes.
to decision making
Right.
and um, guidance?
Right. Right. Exactly. And again, if we're talking about what we just spoke about a second ago, how does that shift or change a bit depending on what environment that we're in, right? So
Hmm.
is there a different way that we kind of experience that when when we have the feeling that we're in a marginalized identity or status versus when we're not, right?
Hmm.
There might be two different experiences, I would guess. So if we're thinking, I think you said guidance and wisdom, right?
Yeah, or decision making even.
Decision making, yes, thank you. Are there different decisions that I would make just based off of what context that I am? And I think that the answer is yes. I think
Mhm.
that there's something that we call code switching, which is when we kind of try on different roles depending on where we are, right? So, an example might be I work full time in a professional setting. I might act certain ways that might feel prescribed by the society of how I'm supposed to act in this professional setting that may or may not be fully ref respectful or accepting of my, particular culture, but are real, not always spoken, but real rules about how I'm supposed to interact in that way, right? How I'm supposed to dress, how my hair is supposed to be, um, how I'm supposed to speak, being on time for meetings, all of these kind of cultural rules that might be here versus if I'm, like I said, kind of in a community or in a space that is maybe not work related, but with other people of my ethnic group, you know, I might kind of go back to what I feel is more innate or more organic, more comfortable, more familiar, right? And so that's code switching. So there are ways that I might interact or make a decision about what I might do, what I might say, a choice that I might make that is based off of my identity or what I think is represented by my identity, right? Because when said that second part is just based off of what people might have an assumptions about me without knowing who I am. And so that might also interact in terms of how I might make a decision or how I might behave in a certain way.
It's a lot to consider.
Definitely. And so that's the piece, right? Where a lot of times, individuals take for granted just the amount of emotional and physical um, effort and burden that often diverse individuals have to kind of experience on a day-to-day basis
Mhm.
because we're doing all of that thinking, all of that code switching, at the same time receiving microaggressions and trying to manage those at the same time.
Yeah, wow. And then you're having to kind of mind read about how you might being perceived.
Exactly. Exactly.
And if you don't know your audience, then that's really tricky.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But the more you get to know people, and then hopefully, well, so I have a bunch of questions, but the
Okay.
next impulse for me is how do you
Yes.
create safe space? And is there such a thing with at the degree of code switching with marginalization and decision making and how you present yourself?
I'm so glad you used the word safe because it's been a struggle with the word safety, right? Because, as a psychologist and doing work, that is the ultimate piece that we want to do is provide safety in our work with our clients. Um, in an energy psychology, we're helping people find safe spaces for themselves. So it's something that we strive for and it's ideal. But my kind of recent musings about safety is there any true safety for diverse individuals in our culture right now?
Okay.
And I say that because it feels like we are still so tied to these really kind of strong societal ideas and norms about how people are supposed to look, act, talk, behave, persevere despite oppression, all these things. But there are true dangers, right? I mean, true life dangers when we think about racial profiling that happens, corporate America, how much stress that diverse individuals kind of experience related to racism, microaggressions, et cetera. So I might be getting a little bit off topic from what you were describing, but I just love the word that you brought up, safe, because it is a struggle to talk about that. And with a lot of my clients, that is the question of, can we ever really achieve true safety within
Yeah,
this society?
right. And there are swings that happen, pendulum swings with
Yes,
safety for all kinds of situations. So maybe the
true.
question becomes, for the earnest person
Yes,
who is becoming more aware, or maybe for the first time, of these
yes,
dynamics, and they have a genuine desire to create a safer environment, maybe not on a corporate level or governmental level, but on a
sure,
personal level.
sure.
What are some things that people can do
Yeah,
to, because these are delicate topics, and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for
sure.
bringing this out, especially at a time when there's a lot more constraint
Definitely.
and danger.
Mhm.
So I am recognizing the risk.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
what are some things that people can do to shift it if they're interested in engaging in greater safety or perceived safety?
definitely. What I've been thinking about recently is, I think shifting to a space of curiosity, shifting to a space of humility and respect. I think a lot of times what feels like is the response is defensiveness or even just an ignoring or almost a feeling of gaslighting, like cultural gaslighting around things. And so that, if there's a question about it, I can kind of confirm for you that that does not create safety. Um,
Yeah.
just in case there's any question about that. But I do think that comes from a space of not fully taking the time to reflect around one's identity and one's, whether you were, complicit with the behavior or not, we're all kind of part of this society that has been created, right? And I think there just needs to be some responsibility around that, acceptance around that. It could be remorse, it could be whatever emotion that kind of comes up about it. But I think if there's some working through of that, then people are able to kind of come out on the other side and have some space around what it has created and how it might impact someone else. And I think that understanding and that sensitivity
Mhm.
will allow people to feel safer.
Right. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
also want to highlight that there's individual differences with all of this. There's no one
definitely.
size fits all. So some people might really enjoy that curiosity, maybe one-on-one, to say,
Yes.
I'm learning and I'm curious and I want to support you in this endeavor. What can I do to help become more aware, become a better advocate? But other
Definitely.
people might be like, I don't want to talk with you about this. Like, do
Right.
your own homework somewhere else. Now you're putting it
Exactly.
on me to have to educate you. You know what I mean? And so I can recognize there's a variety of responses.
Yes. And I'm glad you pointed that out. I mean, I think in a lot of the diversity work, what I tried to remind people is, you know, the work that you can do, like if you're in a relationship where, um, you know, the person has kind of told you, please ask me. I'm willing to kind of, support you around some of this education. But otherwise, when we're talking about educating yourself, it is doing your own reflection. It is going into your own spaces and, either whether that's reading about, kind of the history of an accurate reading of the history of our um, society around oppression, Or it could be, kind of doing some deep reflection around it. It could be journaling about it. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going and as you were kind of referring to, is again, going back to the extra burden or effort, you're now asking the individual who has been oppressed to then educate someone, hold the emotion that that person is holding or having, and now it's the responsibility of the diverse person to try to manage the other persons. And
Yeah.
so it tends to be an unfair and unbalanced situation, but it happens all the time. And
Yes, it
so
does.
if you can avoid it, that would be the better way to do that.
Yeah. And maybe to do some work ahead of time and say, I've been working on myself. These are some things I've
Exactly.
learned. I'm sure I have blind spots. Would you be willing
Yes.
to talk with me about, what I can do or to be aware of certain things that maybe I don't even know? That's the thing with the blind spot. You don't know you have it.
No, it's so true. And the way you worded it was so perfect. I've been doing my work. I'm continuing to learn. I know I don't know everything, but there is this particular thing that I think is impacting us specifically. And so can we talk about that? That is a different way than please teach me all of these things and then, kind of me laying all of my emotions onto you.
Yeah, yeah, good. Thank you for that. Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about different times that I've been in that my marginalization has shown up
Yes,
in different ways. I've lived abroad
sure.
for a couple of years, and that was different.
Right.
And then I was in different communities when I was abroad, and so that's why I
Definitely.
thought actually of that situation about like when I walk into the doors of this space, where
Right.
does marginalization fit,
Yes,
especially if you're from a different culture than where you grew up from where you're living.
definitely.
But
Yes.
also with like things like illness, especially hidden illness. Like it's one thing if someone's, let's say, in a wheelchair or they have a
Yes.
and they're blind, but if you have a hidden illness that is not, like asthma or
Hmm.
immune deficiencies or
Yep.
things that cause you to not be able to be, let's say, working consistent hours or something like that.
Exactly.
Most people don't know, especially if it's relatively rare or hidden, and you may
Sure.
not want people to know, but
Hmm.
if it feels appropriate, then it sometimes does fall on your shoulders to educate people because they don't know.
Right.
So
Right.
it's, yeah. And so maybe just having some compassion for the
Yes.
marginalized person as they're
Yes.
having to explain or
Right.
share or whatever. So, yeah. So I love where this is going because it's hard enough for sometimes for us to even know what our decision should be or the guidance that we should need.
Hmm.
Like I get confused. Like I have different, needs or different, like maybe I don't
Yes.
have time to reflect or I get
Right.
confused messages. And so then to
Sure.
talk about all this stuff with marginalization on top of it, I can see where someone might feel kind of almost stuck, like
Yeah.
overwhelmed. But I think that it's even a more important time
Hmm.
to recognize these dynamics, to
Right.
really anchor with what's your truth,
Exactly.
because it's so easy to get swept away by what other people are projecting or they think is happening, or, yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. And to add on to that, I do think we're all aware of those things and we're all kind of in the same space around all of the pressures that are happening. I'm hoping that we can all kind of come to this similar standing where we recognize that and have some grace, like you said, for both sides. But again, I just think if there was a little bit more of a stop for a moment and just kind of coming from a place of, even if it's kind of verbalizing and like, I get that what I might say in this moment might not be perfect. I'm, I and being aware of some of the things that we just said. I'm not trying to put this on you. I'm trying to take ownership and autonomy for what I have. Um, I just really feel like that would be different. I just worry that there isn't that reflection for a moment,
Hmm.
almost into what is the other person, either how are they impacted by what I'm about to give them, or what does that mean? But that also goes back to you said, there might be some blind spots with that too, right? So if I come from a certain environment where I don't even have to think about I don't know, different socioeconomic status concerns or, not being ignored in the room. I'm the only Black person in the room and everyone else is called before me or whatever kind of situation might come up. If that isn't your day to day, it is very easy to kind of not pay attention to it until, you're until it's recognized or someone brings it up. I think the responsibility when it is brought up is to just kind of have that space of like, let me reflect about that for a second,
Hmm.
versus what I think sometimes is, kind of the defensive kind of posturing that happens,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a long history of complicated dynamics that make people
definitely.
feel uncomfortable, because they know
Yeah,
that that these things are loaded.
they are. They are.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's why we're talking about it to
That is why we're talking about it, right? I know. And it really is what is the saying? Double-edged sword, I guess.
Mhm.
Because it's, some of the responses haven't been great that have been said, but then the silence is not great, right? Like, sometimes we're wanting our in this case, if we're talking about kind of racism, we're wanting our allies to kind of come forward, do the work, speak out, say that's not right, apologize and be remorseful. And so silence, I think either edge is not great. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, I think we're polarized by both of those edges.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's a risk, and people don't want to make a mistake. I'm thinking
Right.
about like when a family has lost a child, especially with
Hmm.
like a miscarriage or
Sure, of
early
course.
pregnancy, before the
Yeah.
baby's born, that there's a problem. And it's like, should I talk about it or not? I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable.
Right.
I remember talking with a person who I hadn't known very well years ago, and
Hmm.
they mentioned that they had lost a child. And I paused and I
Hmm.
said, "Oh, did you have a name for the child?" And they
Yeah.
just stopped and stared at me and they're like, "Yes, and thank you for asking." And no one has asked me that, like out in their
Mhm.
outside their world, their
Right,
ideal
right,
world. No
right.
one had asked them that. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, I just felt like that was something that was present in the room, in the space,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
that it needed to, I'm like, okay, there's a person here with us. So
Definitely.
sometimes going with your gut, I mean,
Hmm.
it's risky. Like they
It
could have
is.
said, I'm so offended because they paused. I'm like, oh goodness, I just
I
stepped in it.
know.
I just made things worse, but you
No.
don't know what someone's so you have to have enough trust to be able to take risks
Yes.
like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway,
And I think your energy about that was just so honoring of the energy of, um, the unborn child, but then also their experience around loss. And I think that probably was conveyed. And so
yeah.
that also made it a safer space. But yeah, I think it's so beautiful that you even thought about that piece. And as you were right, there is so much connection that you have. And so to ask probably just felt really loving.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's hard to kind of go with your gut, I would imagine, when you're having to filter through all these layers. Um, it makes it maybe harder in certain
For some, I do.
circumstances.
Yes, I think you're right. I think if you've done your work, I think if there's a natural kind of, let me kind of try something that I'm being compelled to do, but it's in the spirit of being respectful of all of the identities that I know about this person. I think you're in a safer space. I think if, you don't have that information or you're not, operating from that kind of approach, yes, I think it can be really hard to
Oh
know.
yeah, I mean, it can be really off-putting to say, "Oh, what's your baby's name?" Like
Right, exactly. Yeah.
bam, bam. Like I'm not
Right.
gonna answer. Like, thanks for offending me. How rude.
Right.
Or when people say, "Oh, that must be so hard for you. I can't imagine going through that." That's a distancing.
It
That's like, oh,
is.
you're here and I'm here. But
It
I'm
is.
also thinking about the marginalized person in terms of
Sure.
their own process of trying to figure out discernment and truth and guidance. So,
Exactly.
depending upon the marginalized person's context of who they're with and when and what it's
Yes.
about, And it maybe they're in a space where some people feel safer than others. And
Yes.
so then it's like, how much do you reveal, or how do you posture yourself? Like that's confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it can be. I totally understand. And sometimes when I'm talking in circles, what I suggest is sometimes it might mean you saying something and having to apologize after, right? And
Okay.
and just doing the remorseful apology. I love Carolyn Mace. I've read almost every book that she's written, and I love her piece around kind of that like soul feeling apology, where you just kind of um, apologize with this like really remorseful approach, just acknowledging that you've like kind of wounded someone's soul when you make an injury. And so I think if we kind of approach it in that way, if something were to happen, I think sometimes that might be better than the other ways that we've described it earlier in our talk. Yeah,
Yeah, that takes a certain kind of perspective of
it
self-awareness
does. Yeah,
and generosity of vulnerability to show up like
definitely.
that. Yep.
Definitely. Encourage. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are certain situations where that kind of a deep apology is not a safe thing to do.
That is true.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So you need your discernment for all of it. Yeah.
Yes, you have to always be on your toes.
So I'm trying to see if there's other aspects of this. I don't know. Are there situations that you might think of that either you've observed or maybe even that
Sure.
you've lived through or that you've heard about where marginalization, either discernment and guidance and communication around things went south or went well, or
I mean, I'm sure I've definitely been on either side of it, right? I mean, I've been on the side where, I've had a microaggression said to me, I've confronted, in a thoughtful way. And then, not only, and I struggle with people, kind of the responsibility. Um, so if you're the person who has been microaggressed against, right? And you hold this heavy responsibility of, do you respond back or do you not respond back? If
Mhm.
you do respond back, you're having to manage everything that kind of comes after that. If it's a great response afterwards, you both can kind of leave the interaction, hopefully in a healing space. But if it doesn't, then you're left with all of the, I call it gook
Mhm.
of whatever the person has left with you. But if you don't respond, a lot of us beat ourselves up about it. Why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I teach that person? Why didn't I educate them? Now they think it's okay. You're making up all these things in your head.
Yeah.
And so, again, going back to that, what we were talking about, the emotional kind of burden, is that's the thing where the person who said the comment is in our minds fine and at home and unbothered, and we're still kind of spiraling around something that we didn't say. So
Yeah.
yes, I have been in situations where, like, so for example, microaggressions that I've heard are, you speak really well, which
Hmm.
again, that's a microaggression because why is the assumption that I wouldn't, right? And so, um, oh, you must have gone to really good schools, right? Like, so there's just these things that, again, on the surface, they're not seemingly, offensive, but the assumptions under them are what make it the microaggression,
Yeah.
right? And so the microaggressions are so pervasive because we're just having them sometimes daily, sometimes hourly basis, and having to manage which ones we want to do and which ones we don't. But I've also had some really good experiences where, um, either there's been a question in a way of, just kind of being vulnerable. I've been told that I have a energy that allows that space and that vulnerability, which I try to work on. And so I'm glad that that is the experience that people get.
Hmm.
And so those situations have been really, beautiful and helpful. And, again, all I want is just some hint that you are taking this seriously, working on it, are coming from a compassionate space, coming from a loving space. And that's all I need in terms of a good energy transaction.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah,
Of
I'm
course.
reflecting on marginalized people in my extended family and the
Sure.
elderly
Yes.
from a different generation
Yes.
on all sides of the family,
Hmm.
including
Hmm.
the marginalized and
Exactly.
not, and how there are cultural belief structures that are
Yes.
very embedded and would take a tremendous amount of self-reflection, openness, and curiosity in order to
Yes.
even describe what is taken as being just fact and is not fact actually.
Mm.
And so there's been some deep discussion about how much effort needs to be put in to bringing light to these
Exactly.
microaggressions that happen or are thought
Yes.
of or
Yes.
discussed. And some people are like, it's our duty to go and like shift the consciousness.
Exactly.
And then other
Exactly.
people are like, after age blah blah blah, they're
Right.
getting a pass.
I don't have the energy for it. Right.
And it's like, well, isn't that ageism? But I think that it's recognized as being kind of like too much work and
Yeah.
not worth the return because
Right.
the relationship probably there's probably going to be too much confusion
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and and a bad feeling left, and
Yes.
that it's not going to lead to a greater understanding or a deeper bridge, a more
Exactly.
solid bridge.
Definitely. No, you are completely right with that. And the way that you kind of combine the different ways of it. And again, sometimes it's age, sometimes it's just what day am I in and how much energy do I have? What do I want to give to this? But yes.
Like I gotta get home. I can't do
Exactly.
this. It's gonna be here tomorrow, I'm sure.
Right, right.
We can pick it
Or
up then.
exactly. Or with family. I mean,
Yeah,
I think we've all kind of seen some family dynamics where we've had to kind of negotiate what to do, whether that's around politics, whether that's around
yeah,
race relations.
yeah.
I think that there's been a really hard way of, whether I say something and try to change their mind or whether I don't say something, um, you know, that can just be a really hard place for people to kind of be at. And, um, you know, if we're talking about age, if we're talking about some of our older generations, it can be harder to kind of shift some of that energy if it's not already kind of present or desired.
Right. Or
Yeah.
even an awareness.
Or awareness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or willingness. And so then you have to decide amongst competing values
Yes,
about truth and honesty and transparency and heart
exactly.
connection, respect,
Right.
and there is something to be said about creating a peaceful living circumstance for people.
Yes,
Kind of like an unconditional positive regard, but not at the
definitely.
expense of your own sanity, well-being,
Right.
safety, etc. So it's a balancing act. And people go through this when they come out, when they
Mm-hmm.
have different
Exactly.
political affiliations, when they make big decisions to maybe like change their religion.
Definitely.
So many
Definitely.
times that people are starting to confront an inner truth that doesn't match up with societal context.
Definitely.
And it's easier to be quiet, but there's a betrayal that happens on deep
It
levels for self and
is.
others. So,
It is.
yeah,
And it brings up for me when you say that, whether it's in family or just in other communities that we're in, it's sometimes really hard to take a stand and make a decision and that is against everyone else, or you feel like you're the only one who's saying it, or it's everyone else is quiet when you're kind of making kind of a decision. It's not the easiest feeling, but a lot of times it's that bargaining in our minds of, is this a situation? Is this a battle that I need to kind of, fight? Or is this one that, I don't? If it's a family situation, do I make different decisions if I don't like, kind of how, even if that's a tough decision around, kind of how much contact we have? I mean, it's just really hard. Kind of decisions. And I think each person, as you said, kind of finding that inner truth has to figure out what their value system and what works for them. Yeah,
And finding community that supports you, regardless of whatever
definitely.
the difference from the mainstream is, whatever
Right.
category that is.
Right.
Um, I was just looking at a video on
Okay.
palm reading,
Yes.
and they're
Uh-huh.
like, if you have this line in your hand, it means that you face like a deep fissure at specifically age 35. And
Okay.
unless you make another change in your life, you're going to do the same old thing and you're going to be miserable, basically.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, oh my God, I have that on my hand. And so I thought, okay, where was I at 35? And I
Yeah.
realized that I actually stepped from the conventional. I mean, there were different things that happened in my life
Sure.
personally, because of my family dynamics and stuff, choices that I made. But professionally,
Okay.
that was the bridge for when I went from saying I'm going to hide the intuitive metaphysical parts of myself from the
Mm,
profession because it's too risky, and say, no, I can't do that no longer. I didn't
sure.
do it deliberately, but I made a big change professionally that could put me in
Yes.
a community of people who were like-minded and
Right.
supported that. And then it was many years of battling through that kind of
Mm,
hidden deeper truth and how to kind of
right.
make it come through in a way that was that basically didn't frighten people. Like, I'm like, why
Yeah.
are people so militant? And I'm like, oh my God, they're afraid. Afraid of
Mm-hmm.
the unknown. And I think that this is what happens a lot with marginalized communities. It
Sure.
it can look aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
and I think what's underneath it is fear
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So that kind of changed. I'm like, okay, this is not about a power dynamic. This is actually about safety for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I know that it's not exactly related, but it's an interesting thing about what's hidden and what comes out, what's safe and what isn't, when and with whom. And it
No,
means
that's
sometimes saying goodbye to certain parts of your life or people. And that's hard, especially if you're a bridger who wants to, like, there should be room for everyone at the table. Well, not
exactly.
always.
Yes.
Maybe the
I
table
love the
I'm
way you
setting
connected
that you
that.
don't want to sit at, and that's okay
Right.
too.
Yes. No, I love the way you connected that piece around the safety, right? Because I do think you're right. I do think it's fear of losing one's own safety in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Around either being vulnerable, accepting all that. So,
Or that you're
agreed.
going to lose some aspect of your identity or a power dynamic or a
Yes.
access to, there's a perceived like lack of
Resources. Yes.
abundance, that there isn't enough for
Exactly.
everyone. Yeah.
There definitely is. Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our time on this
Okay.
interesting talk. Is there any, well, and you didn't mention your book coming out, so I definitely
Okay.
want you to talk about that. But is there anything else you want to talk about related to this topic before we stop for today?
No, I just was so glad that you brought up the piece around ableism, because, I think it's one of the diversity identities that we definitely need to have more attention to and space around. And that's actually what led me to energy psychology. I had a history of some illnesses that popped up and connected it to, just some of my work boundaries and et cetera. And so I'm just glad that you clarified the definition at the beginning because I think it's so important for us to talk about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That comes from personal experience. So yeah, I've
Yeah.
lived it many years and my
Me
family
too.
has.
And so
Yep.
it's interesting that it was the last one on my list, but yes, it is very, very important.
That's great.
Yeah.
So tell us about your book. I want to know more.
Yes. So this is my third book. It is The Past, Present, and Future of Racism. And so basically, it's looking, I really wanted to do all marginalized identities, but as you can imagine, um, it would have been the book would have never ended. And so what I decided to do was just kind of break it down. So I am focusing specifically on Black and African Americans and starting from slavery, starting with colonialism, seeing how our society has kind of utilized that. And then come to the present, we had the pandemic that was a social reckoning for a lot of Black Americans and thinking about how that has impacted us, and ends with some future observations, some predictions around what the world will look like, some recommendations around how we can do better as a society in terms of race relations. So I'm really excited. I'm hoping it's still in the uh, at the very end of the publishing piece. So I'm hoping by late summer that we should see some traction on that. But I'm really excited about it. I've always wanted to do a book on racism, so I'm excited.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations for living
Thank
your
you.
truth
Thank you.
and making it manifest. And this will be airing in the fall of 2025. So hopefully,
Okay.
if it's already out, we'll have
Hopefully.
this in the program notes and you
Yes,
can go to your nearest bookseller and
definitely.
get a
We'll come back for
copy.
a champagne toast. Okay.
Oh, that's so great. I'm so grateful for your
Thank
wisdom
you.
and your vulnerability, your
Thank
sincerity and your heart.
you.
And talking about things that are not necessarily easy or
Yes.
popular, or honored all the
Yeah.
time. And so and that book is going to be a good bridge for a lot of people.
I hope so. And I just want to thank you for giving the forum for this, right? And so not only, is this something that needs to be talked about, but having spaces to do so in such a way that has so much grace and love and nurturing of the topic is just really thankful. And it's just really a blessing. And so thankful. Thank you for that.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.